Everybody, welcome to Vision Mix Studios, our YouTube channel, and visionrecordingstudios.com. This week, I am going to do a two-part series video that deals with mixing a song with third-party plugins versus stock plugins in Studio One. I did a very similar series to this a few months ago with Johnny Geib over at the Home Studio Trainer, where Johnny mixed, we both mixed the same song. He mixed with just Presonus stuff and I mixed with third-party stuff. We compared the mixes. We put up the videos. Everyone seems to love that video series, which is great. But recently I've gotten a lot of new subscribers and I've gotten a lot of questions about that particular video series, as well as the mastering series videos that I did, but we'll talk about that shortly. And people have asked me, hey, I love the video series you did with the guy over at the Home Studio Trainer, Johnny Geib, but they're asking me, Dave, can you mix a song and then use third-party stuff, and then you mix the same song and do Studio One or stock plugins, so we can take the variable of the different mix engineer out of the equation, which I thought was a pretty good idea. So then this way you can see how I would work with stock plugins versus how I would work with third-party plugins. So I thought that was great. And I also get a lot of comments and a lot of emails talking about, they watch some of my videos, they see all the third-party plugins I use, and they write me an email and say, well, geez, I wish I can get that same quality, but I don't have all those third-party plugins and it's not my budget. I can't afford it. And they're kind of bummed out. They don't feel they can get a decent mix with the stock plugins. So we're going to try to disprove that here in this video series as well. And third, I get people who will say, things like, the third-party plugins really make a difference. You really don't need third-party plugins, and people sometimes can kind of get on me a little bit because I promote the third-party stuff that I use. And like I said in one of my last videos, I'm not affiliated with any of the plugin companies that I use. The two that I use the most are Universal Audio and Slate Digital. I just happen to love their products. People ask me about them, so I try to tell you what I use. I'm not affiliated with them. They don't give me demos. They don't give me free plugins. They don't even know that I exist, either one of those companies, to be honest with you. Excuse me. So I wanted to, but do they make a difference? People will say, geez, you really don't need the third-party plugins. You can just use stock stuff. It's just as good. And if you go watch a lot of different YouTube channels about mixing and stuff, a lot of people will claim that you really don't need those third-party plugins, that it sounds just as good with stock stuff. And they try to promote, don't buy, third-party stuff. But yet then I watch some of those same YouTube channels 6 months later, and I find that the people that are saying don't buy the third-party stuff, you really don't need to waste your money, inevitably they end up buying a lot of these plugins as well, or a lot of outboard gear as well. So what I want to try to do here is, it's not a matter of better or worse. It's not a matter of do you like third-party stuff? Do you like stock plugins? What's better? What's worse? It's not really about that. What I want to try to do to try to help my subscribers, if anyone has any questions about certain plugins, or does it really sound better, and I use better, that word very loosely. Better is subjective, very subjective, about what sounds better to you. So I'm going to mix a song with just Studio One stock plugins. I'm going to mix that same song with the third-party stuff that I typically use on a daily basis. Let you guys watch each one of those videos. At the end of each one of those videos, I will have the full mix unmastered up on at the end of the video, so you can listen to it and you can compare and listen for yourself, and then you can decide for yourself, do you want to make an investment in some third-party stuff, or are you perfectly happy with the sound of what I got out of the stock plugins? It's really a personal preference. For me personally, I use kind of a mixture of both stock plugins and third-party stuff. I use more third-party plugins, again, primarily just Universal Audio and Slate Digital, but I also, as you'll see, I do use the Studio One Pro EQ, for example. If you're a Studio One user, I use that EQ all the time. In this video series, when I get to the third-party plugin video, I won't use that. I'll use a Universal Audio EQ, but in my normal day-to-day stuff, I use that particular plugin all the time, and I love it. So I think you can succeed with both. However, do I feel that the third-party plugins give you a better, again, I don't mean, in my opinion, a better sound, a more warm recording, a more analog type of a feel, a more silky, gluey, creamy type recording, which is what I kind of go for in my productions? Yes. Do I think you can achieve that kind of tonality just with stock plugins? I don't believe you can. I haven't been able to. It doesn't mean that the stock plugins aren't good. It doesn't mean you can't get pro sounding stuff. It just means it's different. And so this is not a debate on whether one is better than the other. I want you to make up your own mind. For me personally, I use some third-party stuff and I like what it does for my recordings, and so do my clients. You may not feel the same way, or maybe you do. I don't know. So again, I'm going to take you through the song track by track. It's going to be a basic rock track with not a ton of tracks. I try to keep each one of these videos under an hour, hopefully. And then you can watch how I mix each song, the same song with the different style plugins and how I would use them. And then you can listen for yourself. So I hope that will be helpful to the people who are writing in and asking me to do this, to kind of compare apples to apples. Whereas before with Johnny Geib over to Home Studio Trainer, it really wasn't apples to apples because he's a different engineer than I am. Again, not better or worse, just different. He had a fantastic mix on the stuff that he did. People loved the mix that I did as well, but you had that variable of two different engineers. This time, it's going to be the same mix engineer, for better or worse, whether you like my stuff or not, and I'm going to use two different sets of tools. And then you can compare and decide for yourself on the same piece of music, which do you like better, and then that may help make some of the decisions for you, whether you think you'll make in some investment in some third-party plugins, or maybe you'll just stay with your stock plugins. And again, it really doesn't matter whether you're using Studio One, which is what I use by Presonus, whether you're using Pro Tools, Logic, Cubase, Reaper. It doesn't make any difference. They all have stock plugins. They're all going to sound about the same from one DAW to the other. So what I'm achieving in Studio One with the stock plugins, you can achieve those same results or very similar results in Pro Tools, for example, or in Cubase, or in Logic, or any of the other DAWs. So then you can kind of feel for yourself, see for yourself, and listen for yourself, and hear for yourself what the difference is when you listen to the same song done with two different sets of tools, or mixed with two different sets of tools. So hopefully you'll enjoy this video. This is the little intro. I will put this video at the beginning of each one of the mix videos. So if you only see one of them and you don't see them both, you'll kind of get a primer to what this is going to be. I hope, again, this is helpful. I'll try to make them as short as possible, but rest assured they'll probably be an hour long, because I'm going to take you through each track and show you how I would mix the song. And then again, at the end of the video, I will give you the final mix of that song unmastered. So what you see in the mix video is exactly the track that's going to be at the end, where you can listen all the way through, and then you can A/B them. Okay, so again, thanks for those suggestions. I've gotten at least a dozen. I would say people are asking me to do this, so now I'm going to do it. And again, please please subscribe, please share our YouTube channel with others. We're getting more and more subscribers every day, every week, and I so much appreciate it. I hope these are helpful to most people. I think they are, because people are sending me nice emails and saying thank you, and no, thank you. I love doing this, and if I can help you in any way, please send me an email at visionrecordingstudios@yahoo.com, or you can just send me a message through YouTube, and I will get back to you within a couple of days. So anyway, on to the mixing video series, and I will talk to you guys soon. Okay, welcome to the video using stock plugins in Presonus Studio One. If you watch the intro video, you know what this video is about, so I'm not going to spend time rehashing it. Okay, so here is the first song. This song is a song called Torn to Pieces. It's a rock band here. I'll let you listen to part of it in a second. We have a pretty small amount of tracks here. If you look down here at the bottom, we have a full drum kit, kick, 3 kick mics, some snare mics, some toms, some overheads, and some room mics. We have a couple of guitars, dirty guitars, distorted, clean guitars, and then a couple of guitar fills and a guitar solo track. We have a bass and just a lead vocal track. No background vocals at all. I have a couple of buses set up, one for the guitars, one for the drums. That's pretty much it. I didn't bust the lead vocal and the bass. It's on its own track. And then I have over here my effects. I have some 3 reverbs that I use, a small room, a plate, and a hall, and then a delay. And that's really it. And if I open up here the mixer a little bit bigger, you can see all the plugins that I've used. It's all Presonus stuff, which we'll go through each track by track. But as you can see, there's not a lot of plugins here, and we'll talk about why that is in 1 second. So let me just give you maybe a verse here, just to kind of listen to the song so you can kind of get a feel for what we are dealing with. So let's take a quick listen.
You're searching for the answers, to leave the questions behind. You're running from the voice that's always there in your mind. Well, your life is worth something when you give it away. He'll open your eyes, you'll see. He'll light the way. When you give everything, you're free. He'll save you from being torn into pieces.
Okay, so we have a basic rock song there, okay? Pretty straightforward, really good band, really good vocal, great singer, so it makes it easy to mix. Reason why I don't have a ton of plugins on these tracks is because if you're recording the tracks and they're recorded well like this is, the fewer plugins you're going to need, folks. Just a little bit of EQ and a little bit of compression. If you want to learn more about that, go back and watch some of my other mix videos. I talk into detail more about that, but the bottom line is whether you're using third-party plugins or stock plugins, if you're using tons and tons of plugins to try to make the recording sound good because it doesn't sound good in its recorded state, then the recording probably wasn't done as good as it could have been. So if you're actually tracking the band yourself, you may want to think about that. Spend the time up front to get a really good recording of the raw instruments before you start mixing. If you're just a mix engineer and you get a bad song or a bad recorded project sent to you, I feel your pain. And sometimes you have to try to do a lot of surgery with plugins to try to make things sound better. But in this case, this was recorded really, really well, so there wasn't a lot of processing that had to be done. So that's basically what we're looking at. So let's take a look and let's start with the kick. And again, you're going to see I'm using just basically EQ and compression throughout this whole mix. Okay, so here's the kick drum. Let's just take a look here and let's just maybe loop a section and take a listen to the kick. So here we are on the Pro EQ, and let's first bypass the inserts so you can hear the kick what it was before. Okay, so that was the raw kick, the kick inside there's 3 kick mics here. This is the inside kick. So here's the EQ that I used here. Let's just turn this on. Went ahead and bumped it up a little bit at around 48 hertz, almost 49 hertz, couple of dB here to give a little bit of thickness to it. Trimmed out a little bit around 262, a few dB to get some of the boxiness out of there, and then a little bit of a boost up here around the 5K mark to give that click a little bit more slap, because when we combine it with the outer kick mic and the sub mic, it's going to give it a nice blend. So here's what the inside kick sounds like with the EQ, and I'll bypass it here. So it really just brings in a little bit of the top end, a little bit of the low end, but more in the top end. You hear more of the slap of the beater. That's what we were going for here with this particular track. Onto the compressor. So I'm just using, again, the stock compressor here. Let's take a listen. I'll bypass it. Well, I'll bypass it first, and I'll bring it in. So it's just tightening it up just a little bit. So we're using kind of a semi-medium or fast medium attack, about 120 millisecond release. Should be cranking up the gain just a little bit. We're doing about 2 dB of gain reduction, so we'll want to boost it up a couple bit. 4:1 ratio, not a ton of compression, kind of a soft knee. So it just tightens it up a little bit, just kind of just grabs the peaks and pulls them down. Not a lot of tonic, not a lot of compression here. Okay, so that was the inside kick mic. So now let's go over to the outside mic. Bring this up a little bit. And let's bypass all the inserts so you can hear the difference. So as you can see here by the spectrum analyzer, there was really no information up in this upper end. It was an outside kick mic. When it was recorded, there was probably a shelf put on to roll off all the high end and let the inside kick grab most of that. And I just beefed it up a little bit at the bottom end at right around, again, 48 hertz, just a little bit to bring some beef in. And then took about 400 hertz out, took that little boxiness out and dipped it out. Added a compressor. Again, we'll take a look at this. So again, about 4 dB of compression, probably a little bit too much. You should probably jack it down a little bit. So makeup gain of about the same amount of compression, 4 dB of compression. We made up about 4 dB of makeup gain. Again, medium attack, 120 millisecond release, 4:1 ratio, not doing a ton of compression, just kind of tightening things up. There's not a world of difference that you're going to hear here. Okay, but it sounds great on its own, so there's not a lot to really have to do to it. Okay, now we're going to bring in the sub kick mic. So again, with this EQ curve, pull out around 250. There's the kind of that ringy sound. Pull that ringing out of the sub. A little bit of a boost again in the low end, rolled off at the top end. We don't need any of that information when we're dealing with the sub kick mic. And then for a compressor, again, compressing about 3 dB, 3 dB in makeup gain. Okay. Same attack and release settings for the most part, 4:1 ratio, threshold's not as high. And now when you put these 3 kick mics together, this is kind of what you get. So here we start off kind of thin, just the inside mic. A little bit of the boom with the outside mic. You can actually hear the front head of the kick drum, that outer head there, kind of resonating a little bit. And then by bringing the sub kick mic, you get a little bit of sub, a little bit lower end. So that's kind of our kick drum sound. Now let's move on to the snare. Give you a listen to what that sounds like. Let's plug in, here we go. So we use a channel strip. I wanted to do something a little different for the snare. So the Presonus channel strip pretty much has a compressor on this side and then a EQ here in the middle. So basically what I did to the snare is I rolled off the low ends, the real low ends, okay? And then I kind of dipped it out a little bit in the mid, a little bit of a boost here to give it a little bit of body, and then a little bit of a shelf. So here, and then I compressed it about 48% on a fast compression to just kind of tighten things up. And here's what we get. That's before with no compression or EQ. and rolling off around 100 hertz around at the bottom, if I didn't mention that. So that's the channel strip. So again, not a lot of processing done, just a little bit of high end rolled off the low end, give it a little bit of body, and that's about it, and take some of the boxiness out. So that's the snare, the top snare mic. Okay, we go to the bottom. I just used a Pro EQ on this. Didn't even compress this, and because I'm compressing on the drum bus, which I'll show you in a few minutes, which you don't hear right now, you don't hear that compressor, it's not on, but I compressed at the drum bus. But here is the bottom snare mic. So just pulled out a little bit around the 316 mark. 316 hertz was kind of ringy, kind of a nasty frequency. Pulled that out, rolled off the low end at around 100 hertz. A little bit of a bump here, not much, just a dB at about 5K. Blend the two together, and this is our top and snare bottom mic for snare, along with the kick. Okay, not a bad drum sound so far, right? We don't even have the rooms turned on yet. Hi-hat, pretty straightforward. Okay, rolled off the real low end, about 220, took everything out the bottom, took a little bit of a dip out around 500 and a little bit of a boost here at around 6K just to bring out some of the brightness of those hi-hats. For the tom mics, there wasn't a lot of tom hits in this song, so I just used some EQ. Here, got a tom hit here. Just brought out a little bit of the bottom end of the tom and took out a little bit of the boxiness at around 500. Nothing major there. Just kind of pulled out the boxiness at that 500 hertz range, and a little bit of beef there, and that's it. Same thing with the floor tom. Pulled out a little bit of that 500, a little bit of beef there to give a little bit more low end. Here's our floor tom mic, was down here. Okay, no big shakes there. He only hits a few times on these particular mics. But on the second floor tom, he had two floor toms. He hits it a little bit more. So I give it a little bit more beef on this one. Pulled a little more out at that 500 hertz range and a little bit of top end to really bring out the to EQ it a little differently than the first floor tom. And let me give you a little listen to that. So there you go, you got all three tom hits there. So those are the toms. So now let's move over to the overheads. Again, just use some EQ. I'm not using any compression really thus far because I'm going to compress at the drum bus for the most part. But I did do a little bit on the kick and snare. But on the toms and the overheads, I don't really do a lot of compression when I do it on the drum bus. But on the overheads, I just pretty much rolled off, anything under 80 hertz, bring a little bit of top end, pulled a little bit of the boxiness out around 500, okay? Just to get rid of the, so I can get that boxiness sound. Between 400 and 500 hertz is where a lot of that boxiness lives in the drum kit. So I always tend to pull it out a little bit there, only a few dB. So here is the left and right overheads together. That's with them off, no overheads. So when you bring them in, obviously you hear the cymbals, you hear a little bit more of the crack of the snare, gives a little bit of ambience to the kit, so it doesn't sound like it's in a box, which is really nice. And again, just using the Pro EQ, pan them hard left and hard right. Moving over to the room mics, we had some far room mics left and right, and some close room mics left and right. And again, just use a little bit of EQ. On the room mics, I don't tend to do as much of a low cut way down around 30 hertz, but I want to hear the whole kit. I just don't want to hear the top end of the kit for rooms. I want to hear the room. I want to hear the bass, the kick drum, I mean, as much as possible. So I just roll off around 30 hertz to get some of the real low rumble out. And in this particular song, so again, about 350 hertz pulled out, about 5 dB, to get rid of some of that boxiness. So here's what the two close room mics sound like. And again, you could blend these into taste. It's all a matter of how much room sound you really want to have. I kept these kind of low because I also have some room mics here, far room mics as well, which we'll bring in and we'll show you the EQ here. Same kind of thing, 30 hertz, rolled off the real low end, pulled out some of that boxiness in the center on the far room mics, and here's what those sound like. Okay, so that's what our drum sound sounds like. So now I moved everything down to a drum bus, which you can see down here. And over here, I put a compressor on, just a Presonus stock compressor. We're going to compress this a little bit so you guys can hear the difference. So right now it's off. We'll kick it on in a couple of minutes here as we're playing. So let's listen to the drums. So as I bring in the compressor here on the drum bus, I'm only compressing a 2-to-1 ratio, about 3 dB with 3 dB in makeup gain. Just to bring, you can really hear the room mic start to pop out. You can really hear the drum set start to tighten up. A lot more punch, comes a lot more alive, gets a little bit more of a bigger rock drum sound. That's with the compressor. So again, I'll toggle it on and off. With it off, it's more closed in, kind of tight and dry, so to speak. With the compressor engaged, it gives it a bigger, tighter feel. And then I've added a little bit of hall reverb, which is the same hall reverb I'm using on the guitars to kind of put them in that same space. Not a lot, very little, just to give it a bigger sound. So we'll start with a bypass and I'll bring it in again. Okay, so that's our drum sound. Pretty straightforward. I know I'm rushing through this. I'm trying to keep these videos under an hour. So again, just some light EQ and compression on the drum bus and a couple of compressors on the kick and snare, and that's it. And that's the drum sound that we have. Again, the drums were recorded really well. When they're recorded really well, you don't need a whole lot of processing. So that's our drum sound. So now let's move over to our bass now that we have drums. Take a look at that. Okay, again, this was EQ'd on the way in because there's no real high-end information here in this bass. So I just kind of boosted up a little bit here at about 120 hertz just to give it a little bit more bottom end, and rolled off the real super low stuff at around 40 hertz. And that actually should probably be down around 30 hertz, to be honest with you. And that's what our bass sounds like. And I put a little bit of a compression on it using the stock compressor again. So let's take a listen to that. Okay, so again, not a lot of compression here. This was compressed on the way in, so I didn't want to over compress. I just wanted to tighten it up. We're compressing at the highest peak around 6 dB, Most times it's somewhere around 3 to 4 dB, so this should be right around, say, 4.5 dB. Oops. Of makeup gain, medium attack, same release, didn't touch it. Oops, this should be a 4 to 1. 4 to 1 ratio, and this is what we get. So again, sounds really nice, nice and punchy, cuts through the mix nice, plays nice with the kick drum. Okay, so now let's step over to the guitars. We had two guitars, hard left and right, two distorted guitars. And again, some EQ and compression here. Let's listen to this. So on the electric guitars, I just rolled off around 200 hertz to get rid of all that low end, to get out of the way of the bass and the kick. A little bit of a boost up here to bring some of the mid-range out, to cut those guitars through at about 1K, and then again at around 5K, and that's really it. That's all I really did. The guitars sounded pretty good on their own. I don't like to mess with the guitar player's tone too much if it sounds good on the way in, and it did. So that's what we did for both left and right guitars, and then we put a little bit of hall reverb on there as well. Same hall reverb I'm using for the drum kit, so it sounds like it's all in the same space. Okay, now we move over to the two clean guitars. There's one little section here where we have a couple of clean guitars, and all I did again, EQ compression, hall reverb. Give you a listen to that. Okay, so just rolled off the real low end, pulled out some of that 650 hertz. Just it sounded a little bit too honky. Pulled some of that honkiness out of the clean guitars. A little bit of a boost here, so they cut through. And then on the compressor, here we go. Let's take a listen to the compression on that. Again, no big shakes here, just trying to catch the peaks as he's strumming hard on those clean guitars, compressing about 2.5 dB. So we made up the 2.5 dB in gain, and that's it. 4 to 1 ratio, pretty straightforward. A little bit of hall reverb, as I said. Same thing with the guitar on the right side. Same exact EQ settings, same exact compression settings. Then we had two tracks of guitars. One was kind of a fill. Just a couple of spots where we played these little licks. We can kind of take a listen to that. This really just enhanced this part of the song. Just a little, you know, one note bent. So I rolled off the low end, pulled out some of that harshness, a little bit of a top boost here just to let it cut through the mix, and that was really it. And then I compressed it a little bit. And the compression was nothing more than just to have the note sustain a little bit more, about 3 dB of compression, 3 dB of makeup gain, 4 to 1 ratio, medium tack, medium release. Okay, then I put a little bit of delay on that because I thought it would be kind of cool to add a little bit of space to it, a little more space, and the same hall reverb. And again, the delay is nothing more than using the beat delay. I used a preset and just tweaked it just to give it a little bit of some interesting feel to it because it is such a short part. And then we had a guitar solo track. And again, here's the guitar solo at the end of the song. Give that a quick listen. So again, it's not very loud in the mix. It's panned more to the right side because there's a lead vocal over the top of this, so I didn't want it to get in the way, but I rolled off the low end, pulled out some of that 600 hertz range, just pulled some of that honkiness out, gave it a little bit of a lift to let it cut through the mix, panned it over towards the right, and then used a little bit of compression. So really nice guitar solo. Guy did a great job. Love that lead. Anyway, 5 dB in makeup gain. At the peak, we hit 6 dB of compression. Again, doesn't do a whole lot except just tighten it up and just kind of lifts it up a little bit. And that's all it really is intended to do. And I put some delay on it as well, like I did on the clean, on the fills, and then the same hall reverb. So that's our music before the vocal. Again, just to kind of give you a listen to a section of the song. You're going to be able to hear this at the end just so you can hear all the instruments before the vocal. So again, it sounds really good actually. I mean, it's got everything is nice, has the clarity, everything is balanced. You can hear all the instruments, nothing sounds really muddy. It's got some nice big room sounds to the drums. Maybe you may make like a little more room or a little less room, but that's in a pretty good space for me. So that's where we are before the lead vocal track. And just so we know, I forgot to mention, I am mixing through the mix bus compressor, just a stock plug-in. Again, not a ton of compression, so let me give you a listen here. So about 2 dB of compression, about 2.5 dB of makeup gain. We'll bypass it. I'll turn it on so you can hear the difference. So again, it gets a little bit louder, but we're only compressing about 2.5 dB, and I've only turned on the makeup gain about 2.5 dB. So it just tightens everything up. It gives it a bit of thicker sound. That's with a mix bus or any compressor, but that's how a mix bus compressor will work. If you use it sparingly, it just kind of tightens things and glues things together. That's all it's intended to do. It gives a little bit of continuity to the track. Okay, so that's where we are before the lead vocal. So let's get to a lead vocal and a verse and a chorus here. And a lead vocal, a little more processing. Again, EQ, and I use this EQ all the time, even when I'm using a mixture of third-party stuff. I tell people this all the time. This EQ is a really great EQ by Presonus. And then a little bit of compression. So let's see what we're doing here with a lead vocal.
You're searching for the answers, to leave the questions behind. You're running from the voice that's always there in your mind. Well, your life is worth something when you give it away. You'll open your eyes, you'll see. You'll light the way when you...
So as you can hear, that vocal, when I bypass EQ and the compression, sounds pretty darn good on its own. I mean, the guy's a great singer. It was well recorded, the vocal track, so it sounds great on its own. So all we're doing is just taking out some of the low rumble on the EQ at 117 hertz, is rolling off the real low end, pulling out a little bit around the 232 mark, and then also a little bit at 6K. When that had a kind of an annoying frequency to me, I pulled a little bit of it out to tame it a little bit, and then a little bit of a shelf. That's all we did. Very minor EQ moves here to get that vocal to sit right. Compression, same thing. We're compressing, you know, probably around 8 or 9 dB. This should be right around 8 dB of makeup gain, just to kind of tighten it up a little bit. We're not doing a ton of compression, but I wanted to pull the vocal forward, push it up in front of the mix. And so that's what it sounds like. So what I will do is I'll turn this on, let you listen, kick the EQ in, kick the compressor, and you can hear what it does.
The voice that's always there in your mind. Well, your life is worth something when you give it away. He'll open your eyes, you'll see. You'll light the way when you give everything. You're free. He'll save you from being torn into pieces. From the voice that's always there in your mind. Well, your life is worth something when you give it away. He'll open your eyes, you'll see. You'll light the way.
So that's it. So about 8 dB of compression, makeup gain about 8 dB. I made a little bit of an adjustment there. And you can take a look at this vocal track, which is here. Let me close the plugins. You can see why. You can see there's a lot of peaks kind of all over the place the way he comes in at the beginning of lines. So the compressor's kind of squashing that down a little bit. And when you have a vocal track, this was probably not compressed on the way in like some of the other instruments might have been, or it wasn't compressed enough on the way in is what I should say when this was recorded. So one of the challenges with vocals especially is when you got a lot of these peaks here, you know, you have a lot of inconsistency. You can just see it in the waveform. How do you control that? Well, you can do a couple of things. You can obviously use compression, which is what we're using. You can use 2 compressors and stack compressors to try to get rid of some of that, to make it more consistent, so it's not so many peaks and valleys, that it kind of pulls the peaks down a little bit and brings the quiet parts up, which is right what a compressor does, to kind of make it a little more even.
When you give everything, you're free. He'll save you from being torn into pieces.
Sounds pretty good. That compressor did a pretty good job, just like that. That sounded pretty good. So added some delay, and what I typically do with vocals, especially in rock, is I use 3 different delays, or excuse me, a delay in 3 different types of reverb. So in my sends, I start with the delay first, and again, I'm just using a beat delay. Let me turn off the reverb so you can kind of hear what the delay does by itself. Okay, so not a lot of a little bit more feedback. The mix at about 42%. Not a ton of delay, but enough just to kind of give it some space. Okay, so that's my delay. Then I add what I call an office or a small room reverb. And again, when I do this with third-party plugins, I use 3 different types of plugins. But for this example, I'm using all the Presonus stuff, obviously. So here's a small room. So you can hear it. Just you got to really listen for the room. It's supposed to be very, very subtle, and just puts a little bit of space there.
The voice that's always there in your mind.
So you hear the delay, but if I turn off the delay, listen for the reverb.
For the answers, leave the questions behind.
Okay, very, very subtle.
You're running.
Okay, it's very, very subtle. It's supposed to be subtle. one of the tell signs of an amateur mix engineer in my mind is when I can hear way too much reverb at all, but especially on vocals. Unless you're going for that kind of effect, a vocal track to me, especially this song or a rock track in particular, the vocal should have some space, but you should have a hard time hearing the reverb. The average music listener shouldn't even know there's reverb on the track. It should just sound big and full. If you know what you're listening for and you really have to reach for it to listen to hear the reverb and delay, that's just enough reverb and delay. A lot of beginners that overuse reverb and delay, they put so much reverb, so much delay, it sounds like an echo chamber, and you don't want that unless that's what you're going for, a special effect. But in general terms, it's not what you want to do. So I start with the office or a small room, and then I add a plate reverb. And again, here's what the plate will sound like with that.
From the voice that
So again, you can hear the delay, but then you can hear the reverb as well. And you can hear it's only mixing at about 55%. I'll turn it up a little bit.
always there.
So you can hear a little bit more plate there. Depends on, you got to dial this into taste on what you like. And then the mix is at about 20%, the dry wet.
In your mind.
Okay, if you turn it all the way up, here's what you would get.
The voice that's always there.
Okay, so a little bit more, the more you dial in on the mix, the more effect you're going to get. So I try to dial it back a little bit. And then I add a hall reverb. And here's what that will sound like.
Searching for the answer.
Okay, so again, as I bring in these different reverbs, you can hear there's a little more reverb, a little more reverb, a little more reverb. And that's the point. Subtle, with a small room, stacked with a plate, stacked with a hall, it gives you kind of that space with the delay in the beginning of the chain where it doesn't sound overly washed out, but you can definitely hear now that I'm pointing it out to you and you're really focusing that it's there. But when you listen to it in the track, if you're not really listening for it, you can't really tell there's reverb and delay on the vocal. You're not supposed to. That's kind of the point. So that's a nice little trick. If you're always having a hard time trying to get a nice polished vocal sound, something that sounds thick and full with some space without sounding washed out, try the 3 reverb trick. Try the small reverb on, then a plate on top of that, and then a hall on top of that. And again, use them sparingly. And when you're listening to the whole mix, you should have to really focus on the lead vocal, and you should just barely hear that effect. If you can just barely hear it, it's enough. If you can easily hear it, it's too much, in my opinion. But again, this is all subjective. You have to dial it into taste, but that's what we'll do. So here's our lead vocal sound, and that's all I did. Some EQ, some compression with delay and 3 reverbs. And here's what we have. I'll play it right through the chorus.
To leave the questions behind. You're running from the voice that's always there in your mind. Well, your life is worth something when you give it away. He'll open your eyes, you'll see. You'll light the way when you give everything. You're free. He'll save you from being torn into pieces. There's no hope in material things. See, you're wasting your time. If answers are what you're seeking, lay your life on the line.
Okay, so that's the track. It's a pretty straightforward track. Again, we're finishing up at around a -6 dB, -5 dB on the master out. And again, there's no limiter on this because this is what I would send to mastering, about -6, -7 dB. So it may be a little low in volume. So before you start sending me a bunch of comments that the track is too low, what you're going to hear at the end of the video is an unmastered track, and that's where it's at. So you'll be able to listen to this at the end of this video. Take a listen to the whole thing. Here's the mix that I have with just using Presonus stuff or stock plugins in general. Again, just some EQ and some compression, nothing major. If you look at how many plugins we're using, we're not using that many because the track was recorded really well, right? So when it's recorded well, you're going to get a good, it doesn't take a lot to get the thing to sound good, and you're just tightening things up with EQ and compression. But You don't have all the nice third-party kind of warm analog-y different features type of stuff, which we'll watch in the next video. This is just standard stock plugins, and I think it really sounds good. So now what I urge you to do is go check out the other video where I'm going to do the same song and use all the third-party stuff. The video will be a little bit longer because I use a few additional plugins, some tape compression, some old Neve Desk emulators, and some other things to give it more of a colorful, more of a polished, creamier kind of a vintage sound, which is different than just using stock stuff. But having said that, the stock plugins sound really good, and I think the mix, and hopefully you agree, sounds pretty darn good. For what little processing we did, we got a track that's balanced, that you can hear all the instruments, nothing is overpowering, the vocals are nice and clean, everything's in tune, and it sounds like a good professional track, right? So anyway, thanks again for watching. Again, please like, please subscribe to our videos, and meet me over at the next video where I do the same song with third-party stuff. I'll have the intro video there as well, like I did at the beginning of this, so you can just fast forward through that if you've already watched me talk about what this is going to be, the series is going to be, so you don't have to be bored with that 8-minute intro, and get on to that video, and then listen for yourself, listen to the two mixes back to back, and you decide what you like and what you don't like, and send me questions, leave comments below, and we will talk to you soon. So thanks for joining me, guys, and I will see you soon. Take care.
You're searching for the answers, to leave the questions behind. You're running from the voice that's always there in your mind. Well, your life is worth something when you give it away. He'll open your eyes, you'll see. No hope in material things. See, you're wasting your time. If answers are what you're seeking, lay your life on the line. Well, your life is worth something when you give it away. He'll open your eyes, you'll see. Something when you give it away. He'll open your eyes, you'll see. He'll light the way.